Welcome to the Scholar Chronicles. I'm Dr. Loh KS, a historian of Singapore. And what I do on this podcast is to ask fellow scholars to share their stories when they're doing research, when they're in the field. These stories are often, something that we share, in a cafe or over a beer with other scholars, but we often don't bring them into the forefront, into the public. And I think we should, because these stories often have a bearing on our research. When we find a document, when we find a topic after discussing with another scholar, the excitement that we have, when we have these encounters in the field. So these stories sort of shed light on important questions in scholarship, such as, what is it that motivates scholars to do research? What are the struggles that they have faced and how they have succeeded despite these struggles, and what can scholars do in their social role, right? So the aim of this podcast is to encourage conversations and maybe a little bit of action on the relationship between scholarship and society, so that academic research can have a greater impact on people's lives and social issues. Very pleased to have with us two academics, one of them retired, one of them current, from Malaysia, the country to the north. This is really the second episode of the Scholar Chronicles. The first episode was on social historians working on Singapore, and so very pleased to have two completely different scholars from Malaysia, very close to Singapore, but I think like quite a different world in terms of academia and the research field. So very pleased to have with us Wong Koon, who's happily retired and sounding, very bright and cheerful today, as well as Heong. It's very hard to pronounce your name actually, so we'll call you Po. Right?
Yes.
Who I know for quite a few years already. You've come to Singapore before, and we've kind of worked together on history of leprosy in Southeast
Yes.
Asia. So just gonna ask you briefly to introduce yourself and tell us, the audience, who you are. So Koon?
Thank you very much, Dr. Kassim. Yes, I've long retired in nearly decades, as I'm getting near to 77. And as for being bright and cheerful, I think a cup or two of coffee does help. I have taught for many, many years literature, and I started at La Salle Secondary School, where I taught boys in Form 5. And then I went on to teach in University Science Malaysia. But literature for me is not just, a career, something that I can go into to get my bread and butter. Of course, that I can't deny. But it's almost like, without sounding very sacrilegious, a religion of sorts. I think I'll explain later. And as for Kassim's comment that Paul and I seem to be from very different fields, I think I hope to show later that there is a traversing of boundaries, that even in literature, you can work together with social scientists. You can work together with a number of people from other disciplines. I think I will hope to show that later.
Wonderful. Paul?
Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul. I'm currently based in Penang. One similarity that I share with Koon is I'm also working in USM, even though she's already retired, but I'm currently working with USM, and I'm a social scientist. And I like the idea of what Koon just mentioned about traversing the boundaries of discipline. Which is something I've been doing as well, even though I'm a social scientist. And in social science, people tend to box themselves into, you are from this discipline, you are from that discipline. But then for me, to do a good research, it really calls for crossing the boundary of disciplines. I've also borrowed a lot of ideas from literary theories when I'm doing my own research. Even though in the situation of our university, literary studies is completely in a different school. from where I'm affiliated with currently. Yeah.
Mm. Right. It's great to have this start to where we see that we share certain common values and approaches. I think what we want to do today, right, is to kind of get a sense of the state of the humanities and the social sciences in the Malaysian context, and try to draw those stories, those experiences that you have, trying to make it work, right? Trying to teach and trying to research about literature, about a post case, I think, political science and post colonial theory in Malaysia, and in terms of thinking about being a public intellectual as well as a scholar in the Malaysian context. And both of you, I really admire what you've been doing, what you've done in that sense as well. So maybe it was very interesting, So Koon, to hear that you were a school teacher, a literature teacher before you joined academia. Could you talk about that and, what prompted you? Was there a moment or incident that prompted you? Did you learn anything from being a teacher that said, I want to go further and do a PhD in literature?
I think when you teach in secondary school, you are meeting with a variety of people. And I happened to be teaching a class of boys who were almost termed as irredeemable by the then headmaster. It was a Catholic school. It was brother somebody, I won't name him. But I think what was interesting is that teaching them English, and they didn't do literature, the parts of the poems that they were able to really feel, the boys were wonderful basketballers and they were wonderful footballers. They were seen as not very word alert, but literature has to do with words. It has to do with what, I'm going to be long-winded about what Shakespeare says, words, and also what Wordsworth says, words give you reflections too deep for tears. And these basketballers and these athletes, these boys in the worst class, I saw that they were able to feel, they were able to empathize. It's just that they needed some time. And I gave extra lessons in the afternoon. So the brother was very appreciative of it, you see. But it then propelled me onwards to say that I want to study this subject deeper. I want to really know it. I already had a BA, but I want to know more. So I was doing my master's while I was teaching. And Prof. Lloyd Fernando was a wonderful mentor, knowledgeable and wonderful. And he was also spreading out literature into what is called the post-colonial scenario. This post-colonial theory thingy, this new thing, actually has been there. It has been there with writers from the Caribbean, like Wilson Harris. Sorry, I'm going to drop a few names. They have been already deconstructing the colonial unitary narrative of hegemonic control. But today, of course, it's all formalized by all its subalterns. But coming back to it, that's why I wanted to go in. And Lloyd was a wonderful supervisor. He managed to spread literature to new literatures in English from the Caribbean, from Africa, from various ex-colonies. And that was wonderful. So, but coming to your point about advice to young academics, I think it is very important, if you want to do literature, that you must have a love of words and reading. You must have an ability to withstand long hours of solitary monastic reflection. Whether you like it or not, you have to do that. You don't have that many opportunities for fieldwork. Not that they're not there, I'll tell you why later. They're there too, but you have to be able to want to be reflective. You have to meditate and think. You have to go back to the old monastic tradition. But having said that, it doesn't mean that you can't be an Asian or even world public intellectual, because you can go out and do research in schools. See what are the shortcomings in the curriculum. In fact, I was in the Malaysian Literature Curriculum Board for many years, and Dr. Zawia, who has passed away, was chairing it. And we all tried to bring things to a point where we are trying to ask questions about the unitary narrative of nation, which the politicians will all want one narrative. So there is a possibility of marrying the two. But to marry the two, public intellectual work and your own love of the subject, you still must have a love of the subject first. You still must have, you see, that's why I don't want to throw out the close analysis of words just because I want to do feminist theory, I want to do post-colonial theory, I want to do post-structuralism, I want to do all the kinds of things that are famous. Don't forget the old thinkers, Gramsci, Foucault, they were just reflecting philosophically that we grab on them when we do our post-colonial theories, our gender theories, Gramsci and all this, we were packed in. It's not their fault. They thought meditatively. We grab onto what they have, the bits and pieces, and form our own theory. So the final line is love your subject. Go into it, think deeply, then apply whatever theory you have to get published and to get promotions. That is my advice.
Tell us about this love of words and what do you say? Love of words and readings, right? And texts, right?
Yes.
And
You
do
see,
all these theories, right? Do they actually enhance this love or do they detract from it?
Now I'm going to do some self-promotion. I think Beng Lan wouldn't want me to promote that. You know this book that Beng Lan edited years ago?
Right.
I have an essay in it that I think explains quite clearly my own journey as a literary scholar. I wouldn't even use scholar, just a person who likes literature. I'm quite tired of the word scholar and whatever you have, professor or whatever else, because I think it's just the love of the word. Now, what is it that makes you love words? I think quite often it is because I didn't have a knowledge of Chinese that I'm sure if you know Chinese, and now I'm trying to learn it, there are many beautiful words because a word can give you various reverberations. It can give you the negative side, the dark side of the moon, but it can also give you the bright side. But more than that, it can give you the mix. I think it is what Wordsworth says about thoughts too deep for tears. Now, does that help anybody? I don't know. Because it is the sense that when you read a line, if the structure is very good, and it doesn't have to be very long, look at Bertrand Russell, his sentences are very short. It is that ability to capture it. Or look at our Chinese Si Gui, I don't know how to say it in Mandarin, Si Gui. Now I'm learning the 4-line quatrains of the Chinese. Fantastic. Yeah, the objects that are ordinary in our blood, that's how language works. An ordinary object, a daffodil. Just daffodil, lila, come out in the spring, yellow color. But it gives you thoughts too deep for tears.
When do you think you discovered this love? Was it in school?
Yes. I think it's also partly because of family background. And I think whether we like it, we're all affected by family background. Whether we live in Bukit Hosui or where I live, because you know why? Our family was very cash-strapped. So when you get a book, not like today, entitlement, Dad, buy me 500 books online, and they will buy or something. When you get a book, when you're in a very cash-strapped family, you just value it and read it. And that love comes from the fact that the item is precious. Today, can you get anybody to read? Even IT books. After one, I have a student today, after 2 paragraphs, she tells me, it's wrong. I can't read any more than 2 paragraphs. Half an hour is enough for me. So there is that sense of, now, does that help anyone? Does it mean that the people who are well-off do not read? No, I do have many students who read too. I think it's just that sense that people must be allowing themselves time, not instant coffee, instant Indomie, please.
I think reading is really a slow process, and which today's, with all this communication technology, people are just so impatient, getting more and more impatient, especially
young people.
Young people, like in things like reading. Yeah, they just cannot bear the slowness of reading, that you are trying to enjoy every word, that especially literary works, which is
when I was a kid, I love reading as well. I could only buy one book a year. That was on my birthday, so I would stay 1 hour in the bookstore trying to find that book. That was how it was. But I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of get what you mean by, you know, the lack of reading today. I do think the culture of reading has changed, but there is still a culture of reading, and maybe we can think about later on, right, how we can draw upon it to encourage young people to read. Um, I'm going to put you aside for a while and go
Ah,
to Paul.
yes, please.
Tell us. So I was trying to. I mean, I know you for quite a number of years, right? But I never really know what was your background.
Mm.
So it seems that from your PhD, it was in Pol Science,
Yes.
and your work is post-colonial studies,
Yes.
generally speaking. Is that
Yes.
right? How did you get into this?
Yeah, I know that even today it seems it appears like a very weird combination for a person who are in the department of the section of political science doing things like post-colonial studies. But my trajectory is really I don't know, quite a I don't know how to put it. You know, I my bachelor degree was actually in physiotherapy. So
Mm.
and I had a 1 year clinical internship, and I studied in Taiwan. So and then the 1 year clinical internship really prompted me to think a lot about the nature of the job. I didn't really enjoy clinical job because I have to admit, to do a clinical job, you have to really be able to handle a lot of things, multiple things, not just the clinical things, including the emotions of not just your coworkers, but the patients. People come into hospital on the worst time of, the worst day of their life. Or, they come in usually for physiotherapies. We have to handle people who are paralyzed, and there are a lot of sufferings that I noticed, and I think I was too young to handle that back then, and I thought that I want to keep a distance from it, and to learn more about how actually can medical personnel handle that better, which was not taught during my training as a physiotherapist, because all the trainings were really very technical, like the physiology and anatomy, all these very or even the skills of treating patients, and so I didn't really enjoy the clinical job. And but and during my high school time, I was really interested in reading, in watching movies, so things that are quite close to literature. But the school system in Malaysia, I think it had something to do with in 1990s, Malaysia was going on to this uh, developmentalist road, and I think the government was encouraging more people to take up science, engineering, like that. And even though I did very good in my SRP in Form 3, and then those with good results, they were discouraged to move into literary studies. They were actually forced to do science stream. So that's how I ended up in science stream. And then I did very bad. I ended up, my result was really bad. And but then yeah, so that's how I ended up becoming taking up physiotherapy, but didn't really practice it except for the 1 year clinical internship. And then after that, in my master degree, I completely shifted to social science. Yeah, that's how that's my trajectory lah. But then another thing I think that really shaped my scholarship is those years I spent in Taiwan. It was in the mid 1990s until 2001. So over the 7 years period, it was a period where Taiwan really underwent a lot of transformation, including they they started to have election to choose their own president, and started to choose their own mayor of Taipei City. Oh, so I would call this like democratization. So a lot of social movements back then. All these things really shaped me. And how it shaped me? I think it shaped me that I needed to look at things from below, not from above, because before the democratization, in Taiwan, it was under the rule of a very authoritarian nationalist party. And today, after the democratization, we can see that they have come up with a lot of oral histories of those who were imprisoned or even executed. You know, their family members came up to talk about finally, you know, see the light, that they have a chance to share the stories of their parents or grandparents who were imprisoned or killed during the White Terror time. And this is something that I think very important for me, and shapes my perspective in doing social science. And I refuse to see myself as just a political scientist, because what I've been doing has been traversing this disciplinary boundary, and I don't see myself. I see myself more as a social scientist than a political scientist, which is wider, so much wider than the narrow perspective of just social science, of just political science. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. You know, we often don't talk about enough about the context that we live in that influenced us before we, you know, go into academia. And I think we should talk a lot about that, because that is something that connects academics, actually, right? You talk about generations of academics and where they come from, right? So Koon, maybe I can ask you, so you were talking about this excitement, right, of this discovering words and texts. When was it? Was this in the early 70s that you started in academia?
I think I started teaching in USM in 1978 after some years of teaching in secondary school. But I think what Paul has said just now has also motivated me to talk a little bit about context, because so far I've talked about the love of words, and it seems very much as if that is so divorced from public issues, political agency, constituencies. The reason why I didn't elaborate on it is that I thought the essay would tell you everything on this essay. But then again, the thing that is important is more for me to highlight one thing that really worked on my mind and made me feel that I have to move from just literary analysis to something called critical literacy or cultural politics. Now they're very famous terms. Now everybody's using critical literacy and then all that. That was Operation Lalang. I think that Operation Lalang happened just after I returned from Berkeley. And Berkeley did me some good, because I was quite a lot of we call it F.R. Lewis. F.R. Lewis is this famous canonical English critic who says that you look at the beauty of the word, all that, which is fine. But then when I went to Berkeley, we had Dipesh Chakrabarty who was there. We had all of these like David Lloyd who was there, Lisa Lowe, who were all doing what is called discourse analysis of sorts. Actually, Bakhtin has done that too. But what was important was that Berkeley has a whole multicultural setup and various discourses, Chicano, this and that. So I told myself, you better read more than just literary theory or the great canonical works. So when I came back, it happened that Operation Lalang started. And I remember it was Dr. Mustafa Anwar, who told me, told me about Aliran. And Chandra Mustafa was taken in during the Operation Lalang. And it was that time that I decided to join the Aliran and get together with the others to write letters of appeal for Chandra. So Operation Lalang is one of the most brutalizing moments in Malaysian history. That's what I put in my essay. And with that, the citizen subject has to rethink her identities in flux. It means that the nation-building narrative of identity has to be somehow renegotiated, interrogated by looking at fragmentation, hybridity. So who was I? I am a Malaysian fourth generation, a migrant. I am now living in a country of multiracial proclivities. There are various races. So how do I place myself? I'm a woman, so gender is also important. So all of these multiple subjectivities became important when I look at literary analysis. But I'm also very concerned about forgetting the beauty of the text. It was this great feminist scholar, Caroline Hellbrun, who says that she's quite tired of theories that will obfuscate and sort of overshadow the beauty of the text, so that you only get a lot of theories and you don't get to feel the dilemma of the human being in the text, the human being portrayed, the characters. I don't want that. I want the theory to be able to complement and to sort of enhance the beauty of the text, if that can be done. It's very difficult. If you read somebody like, who's that lady, the famous Indian lady who's doing subalterns all the time, the lady with the gray hair like myself, what's her name? My goodness, don't tell me I'm forgetting names.
Gayatri Spivak.
Gayatri. She's done a lot. It's wonderful. A lot of things that she's done are groundbreaking. But I cannot sustain reading too much of her work because I want to go back to the text. I want to go back to the Indian lady's document. She uses an Indian subaltern lady to talk about the theories. That's wonderful. But what did the lady say? What were her words? And here is where Paul's oral histories come in.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah.
What did she say? Did she even expect that what she said would be theorized? And how would it be theorized? And how would it help us? That was always in my mind.
That was something
I met Deepesh in Berkeley. And Deepesh is a very nice person, very open. And we shared a lot. And he also admitted that sometimes you do have to go back to the to the so-called ground level. Yeah. That's how I feel. Frankly, I'll be very honest. Too many theories are too dry for me to read, especially now that I'm in retirement. I just want to read about, if I could read Chinese, I would read the war diaries or the emergency diaries of women during our emergency. But I can't read Chinese. So I'll have to wait for people to transliterate or to see them. But then I can hear the voice. Yeah.
Paul, do you have any response to what Koon was saying?
Yes, talking about how this theory obfuscate the real living experience of human being, the dilemmas that they are experiencing. This is something sometimes I think the so-called injustices of theoretical writing or academic writing done on ordinary people's life, for the sake of theorizing and conceptualizing. Sometimes I find that is the limitation of academic writing, and it can be as exciting and also as boring as it can be when you are trying to reducing people's life into a few theories and concepts, which is really unfair and injustices to people's full stories, their experience. And this is something that I really learned a lot when I was doing the oral history of the May 13 survivors and their family members. It really took me a long time to think about how to present their stories. So presenting the stories of people that we interview, whether for personal interest or for academic, the purpose of academic research, I think it's very challenging to think about how to present and represent these people's stories. And then, but for the May 13 book, after a long time of reflection, I thought that it would be good to present their stories in full version. And then another challenge that I came across is actually whether to present them as a third person story or as a first person voice. Because I have a group, so we were discussing a lot on that. And then we actually test two different types of writing. One is to write in their first person voice. The other one is to present their stories as a third person. Like we are talking about what they were doing rather than they are talking about themselves, what they were seeing, what they were experiencing, what they were feeling, and things like that. So it ended up that the first person voice is so much more, how to put it? Perhaps Koon, as a reader, it is so much more powerful than presented as a third person kind of story. So it is really very powerful and it touches people a lot because it is their voices. And talking about voices, sometimes I don't really like it when scholars or academics or even activists, they talk about giving voice to people.
Huh.
People already have the voice. You are just creating a platform for them to tell their stories rather than giving them voice. I think the this saying that you're giving voice to people to me it sounds really condescending because people already have the voice. And then through their stories, through their voices, you see um, the dilemma that we are facing in every day, as a human being, especially during uh, challenging moment like whether it was May 13 or whatever other, historical episodes. Yeah.
Is this the book? Is this the article in Jumbra's The Family Narratives and Abandoned Monuments?
No, I have a different book called Life After.
Life
It
After.
is a collection of oral histories
What year?
of people.
What year is that?
It was published in
Oh,
2000.
I've come across that book. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that book. Yeah.
So maybe can you elaborate, like, so in this book, right? How did you present the stories as they are in the first person? How did you write about these stories?
Yeah, the stories were presented in a first person voice. And it was meant to be an oral history, but then we also face challenges of doing oral history because conventionally, ideally, oral history should be recorded. But then for this project, we were strangers to those people we wanted to meet and interview. So some of them, they don't feel comfortable to open up if we on the recorder. So they chose, as a compromise, we have to just off the recorder and then listen to them and then record as detailed as possible and then get back to them later to ask them, are there any things that we got it wrong or whatever? But then the stories are written in a first person voice. And yeah, that's something that we did. And also I think for presenting stories like oral histories, there are a lot more other challenges. For example, we are, especially when we are textualizing the interview, we turn them into text, transcribe them, turn them into text. We are removing a lot of things like their emotions, their nonverbal expressions, even their colloquial expression. We can still capture it, but we cannot capture, for example, their the emotions and even accent. Their dialect. Dialect can be very a lively expression of a person's identity. But this will be removed once you textualize it, and it also becomes objectified as well when you are textualizing a person's life story. Then it becomes something that they can refer to after this, especially after the book is published. So people are like, okay, I don't want to share my stories again. Perhaps you can just refer to the book. And this is something that I don't know whether it is good or bad. Perhaps Kasim can also share a little bit.
Yeah,
of
I
your
do.
research.
I have some thoughts, but I think Sokun has something to say, right?
I just feel that I'm so delighted to hear Paul because there is a certain sense of conscience and honesty which we need among our young academics. I know how difficult it is to try to have this kind of conscientizing, to remind yourself, and then also to think of how one can get promoted and how one can get a long CV. So it is a struggle. What Paul has raised, I think, are very difficult dilemmas. And I also don't want people to be so caught up that they cannot do any work. So I think the objectifying of the subjects that you interview because you are turning them into a text is not a total loss. The text itself will still remain to give others who do not know anything about them some insight. And as for the fact that you cannot capture all the emotions, the dialectical variants, that is something that I think you can't do much about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you ask yourself the other question, which is that without any record of them at all, in any language, they will just disappear in the mist of history. So you are doing something good. I years ago, Dr. Molly Lee and Dr. Lien Hing, did a book on women who were abused called When the Butterfly Flaps Its Wings. It was put into a book, first person narrative, and I reviewed it. I can't remember where I reviewed it, but if you want to, I can show you the article. But the book, I don't know whether it's still available. They also came up with this dilemma because you're talking about abused women. You want to show the emotion, you want to have that kind of honesty, but what to do? So they did it as a kind of first person thing. And of course, they also had difficulty with people not wanting things to be recorded because some of them were still living with their abusers, as it were. So all of these things will come in, but I don't think they are so sort of a conundrum that cannot be solved. I mean, just do the best you can, and always reassure yourself that you still have this record. You still have done this record. It's still an honor to them. It's still a contribution. This book, you know, we can, I don't know if you can get it called When the Butterfly Flaps Its Wing. I don't know whether Garab Budaya Bookshop has it in
Are
PDF.
those two editors academics?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
USM.
They have been scholars for many years. Molly Molly and Lenny have both been scholars in this field for a long time, but activists too. Yeah, working for
Right.
women's causes.
Sounds like a wonderful
Maybe
book.
I can always make a copy for Paul. One day I'll be able to see her, so I'll make her.
Thank you.
Copy.
Yeah.
Or I can even give it to you because now my books I'm giving to Tom, Dick, Harry, and Joe. Anybody who wants it, they can have it.
I'm happy to have it. I'm happy to inherit.
I have given 350 books away already, and now I still have some. Yeah. Now I don't want to keep all of this because I'm decluttering. But yes, we still have those. There's this sense of, it's very gratifying to see young academics who are very concerned about how they should do their work, right? I think that is very good. Both of you are good examples. Of course, we all want to earn acknowledgement. We all want to earn, what can I say? Money. If I want to be graphic about it, money. Who doesn't want money? I mean, a gaji. Everybody wants to have bread and butter. I mean, on the table, you know.
Yeah.
Let me turn that point to Paul, right? Do you think you are typical or you are a minority among young Malaysian academics who have this social conscience?
I wouldn't call myself like praise, like it sounds like self-praising, self-conscious, but I think I am a minority in the sense that I don't restrict myself to just getting published in index journals or just for the sake of getting KPI. For example, the book, this book called Life After, I never list it down for my CV because for me, that book is something that I want to dedicate it to those who accepted my interviews. Even though I did have one journal article in Jambras, or some of the interviews came from that oral history interview. But then that was the only article, and I did that because back then, like what Koon just said, you know, as a junior academic back then, I was struggling to get to secure a better job, and I need publication. And then I was really juggling between a lot of different things, and there are different expectations of a scholar as well. You know, the university want you to do so many things, and then the society expect you to do so many things, and so on and so forth. And then so it's really very challenging to meet different expectations, and I just tried my best. Yeah. So yeah, that's the struggle that I went through when doing that project. It was actually unfunded, and I tried to do it like, you know, get as many volunteers as possible, and also to kind of like share the spirit of doing an unfunded project. And we were hoping that with this book, then once we are also lucky that we get the help of Garab Budaya, who Pak Chong was willing to publish that book. And then we're also thinking about, you know, this book is very important for Malaysia. We need to publish it in multiple languages. But where do we have no funding at all? So where do we get the money from? So we were thinking of, you know, just come up with one language first, and then through the sales of the first book, and then we go and support the translation, so on and so forth. So we are now in the process of publishing it in Bahasa, in Malay language. And it is a very long process, but I think we all learn something in trying to work with people who are actually younger than me, but then we all learn together. Even though they are younger, they have a lot of ideas. For example, the experiment that we did, trying different versions, same story but written in different kind of like voices, the first person narrative and the third person narrative, and to see the difference.
So essentially, Paul, you did two projects, basically, instead of one, right? You did the academic version, and then you did the kind of more social version, more for the public audience, in that sense.
Yes,
right.
You can say that, but it's actually the same project. It's just that I using the materials for academic publication and the same material, and then publishing for public readership.
Correct, but that means you need, in terms of time, in terms of resources, energy, you need to split it up, right? You need to make it additional. So when you were doing the book, right, the non-academic project, how did you adjust, or modify the material so that they would speak to a public audience better?
That goes back to the idea of let the interlocutor speak for themselves. So they were speaking in their first person narrative, rather than me as an academic cutting their stories down, like, quoting them and then to fit in some theories, or to strengthen my so-called argument, quoting here and there, cutting their stories down. No, for this book, every interlocutor, their stories are presented in as what they have told us. But then in first person narrative rather than third person, because some oral history, they are presented in a third person narrative, but we choose to present the stories in a first person narrative. And that will be very different from academic writing, because in academic writings, your interlocutor's stories never get to be presented in its entirety. It's always cut down in a small paragraph. But then in this book, their stories are told entirely in what they have told me.
And because it's a non-academic book, it's a book for the general reader, the kind of matrices, the kind of evaluation, you're no longer looking at how many citations you have, how many pats on the back from fellow academics. How has the response been? Do you know any sense of how people have engaged with your book?
Judging from what I can see on social media, I think people are reading it, and but then it is also not easy to read, not because it is not academic writing. So it is difficult, not in that sense. It is difficult because of the strong emotions that is passed on through the stories, the things that people, all the encounters that people went through during that episode, and it was very intense because people are talking about their loss. People are talking about how they cope with the loss, how they cope with the fear they encounter during the riots. So these are the difficult part of the book. And talking about difficult stories, so we also try to, in terms of the design, the layout design of the book, we have taken that into consideration as well. We know that it's going to be very difficult to read. So the spacing, and also every story is inserted with what do you call that? These sketches of one thing that derived from the story. Let's say the story talks about a cinema in KL, so we'll get someone to do an illustration, sketch that cinema out, or maybe someone mention about something that is important to the person who passed away during the riot, then we get someone to draw that thing, to do a sketches of that thing, and then insert in that story, so that when the reader read, they have space to breathe, because it's going to be very difficult. Yeah.
You do have the book on e-form, right? PDF, right? Could you like show us?
No, I don't have it because of Pak Chong.
He didn't give it to you.
He did,
you-
but then I didn't share because for copyright issue. And then once the e-copy is circulated, then it will be difficult for Pak Chong to sell the book.
No, but you do have the kind of the pre-publication final print, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can show that. You can circulate that actually. You can share that. You don't share the ebook itself. Yeah. No, I just ask you about it because it'll be nice to be able to see what you just described.
Oh, I can show you here. You
can
one
share
moment.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, no problem. We will be happy to see it.
So this is the book.
All
and we
right.
get
Yeah.
a very
I've
famous
seen it at
artist.
Gerak Budaya, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, people do look at it. When I was there for Keijin, launch of Keijin's Francis book on Keijin, people do look at it. I've seen people looking at it. Yeah.
And this book cover is designed by Sharon Chin. She's a very talented artist, and it's very meaningful because it is stitching. So it's like stitching the wound of the country, of the nation. Yeah.
Very good indeed.
Patchwork. Yeah. And so let me show you, like, for example, here you see a camera.
Yeah.
So because the interlocutor talk about camera, and then so we get someone to do a sketch of a camera, and or this one, a boy selling nasi lemak.
Very well done. Very well done.
Yeah. So this is how the idea of the idea didn't come from me. It's from another friend. So you can say this is actually a collective work. So that's why I never claim that this is Paul's work. No, because for me this is really a collective work.
Where is the author? Is there an author cited?
No author.
No author.
Purposely. Yeah, no author. It only says the oral histories of the May 13th incident, and no author.
All right.
But at the back, we do have the members of the group who did collected.
Yeah. You have to give them that acknowledgement at the back because of the work done.
Yeah.
I think we should also add that May 13th is, of course, one of the explosive moments
brutalizing moments.
Yeah,
one of the most brutalizing moments.
And so, great that you have done oral history on this. Deserve a lot of credit for it. So Koon, I want to kind of go back, right, to the 70s. I'm very interested in the 70s. And you have talked about your kind of more measured, right, view of literary theory today. But in the 70s, right, did you encounter something called the New Left? And what was your idea of the New Left at the time?
New Left. I'm afraid that I'm not very clear about the definition of that. Unless you can give me a few names. Yeah, because it's never very clear.
The New Left as opposed to the Old Left, right? The Old Left was about class. The New Left is to divide that up into the different categories, the new categories. Gender.
I'm not very sure that I can say that much about them, but all I can say is that, when you talk about leftist movements, they can always morph into different things, fragmentation lah, this lah, that lah, or intra-left conflict lah. So for me, I mean, because I'm not a social scientist, and I go back to the old thinkers like Bakhtin and all of these chaps. So when you look at all of these titles like New Left, Old Left, or whatever left, I just, frankly, I'm not that much help here, Kasing, because why? I don't even pursue them or follow them. I know there's fragmentation within all of these areas where people are leftists or whatever. There will always be fragmentation depending on which part of social life or economic life they want to foreground and which group they want to speak for. And I will be very honest. To me, all of these left, new center, new left, right, center, or whatever you call them, they are all ideologically somehow owing allegiance to something, to funding, if you don't mind my saying so. How to start an organization and say, I say I'm the New Left, founder or somebody, I have a group, I want to write something, I want to propagate something, I want to do that. Where am I going to get the funding? I know this sounds very cynical, and I don't want to be cynical. I'm not saying they have no function at all. They have their function, but they don't fascinate me, Kasi. Not a bit. No fascination at all.
No fascination. Not even then. Not even then.
Not even then. But then what worked for me was that I had not read all of these guys, like Gramsci, I never read them, Bhakti, I never read all these old guys, I never read. It was going to the canteen, the social science canteen, meeting with the late Pu Kei Jin. Well, he won't care, lah. He will just blast you, lah, but he's a very kind person. Then Masna and Johan and all of these people. So we did work together. Masna and I did work together, and we all sort of like, I was actually more gravitating towards these social scientists than my own group of literature people in USM who were not really that, what can I say? They don't want to question anything. They don't want to question anything. So I did feel that there is a need for what is called critical literacy, which is why we try to introduce that into the examination curriculum as well as questions. But even then, we have to get, what is a critical literacy? It's just being able to see that you cannot take away from power and ideology when you look at a text. You can't. You can't take away from positionality, which is also very important for, I think, when we do oral histories, when we interview people, we have to explain as simple as we can our position to the person we are interviewing, even the shopkeeper or the guy on the street. Meaning what? Who are we? We are not the guy who is the friend of the guy, sitting there buying kway teow. We are actually an academic. We have got this kind of training. Don't think that the guy who's you're interviewing won't know. If you explain to him, you tell him who you are. That means you make clear your positionality. So that is what I learned also from the social scientists that we talk with. And Cajun will tell me things like, who are you? You make clear lah to people before you make all this assumption you're speaking for them. Like that. Okay, so that's clear. So critical literacy is this ability to say that I'm going to be honest about myself. I'm going to tell who I have this power, I have this power, I have this power. I have this power to write about you. Okay? And soon it might be published in a book for public consumption. And one article will be not for public consumption. You think that the guy will not understand if you tell him the brass, but just tell him, you go high scholarly you are. Then the guy will say, okay. He might be very delighted, or he might say, can't control that. So that was interesting to me. And finally, when I went to Philippines for the Asian Public Intellectual, I taught in two schools. One was a very middle class school. So I got to tell them who I am, why I'm there. And then one was really not very, sort of like, I wouldn't say like in one of the less sort of middle class areas. And you see the difference between the students. I wouldn't say that one group of students is brighter than the other, but when you teach the richer ones, you have to also give them certain sense of who you are and what you are, and also draw out from them certain things. And literature is wonderful for drawing out. You know why? E.M. Forster, the wonderful British novelist, tells us that all human beings are like an iceberg. I'm telling my students today even. 1/3 only you can see, which is the public self lah, the doctor so and so, the very, very collected fellow lah. That's 1/3 of the iceberg. The 2/3 underneath are our doubts, our greed, our drive for power, our jealousy, our competitiveness, our wanting to stab each other in academia. That's all underneath, or whatever you want to do lah. So what do we do when we teach? We should be quite frank. We should be saying that we are also like showing you only 1/3, telling the students. The other 2/3 is just us, human, with all the culpabilities, the vulnerabilities, the 7 deadly sins, if you want to use the Christian analogy. I find that it works even today with my A-level students that I do teaching with. I still teach A-level. And they will say, like that. They will be more honest with themselves when you tell them that you also have all of this. Most of us don't dare. I can do it because I'm retired and I'm already, I don't care what they think about me. I say, I have this, I have envy of this. all that. Most of us don't want to because the student may say, oh, you're like, huh? But time, I'm not saying that that's easy to do. I'm sure when I was young, I wouldn't want to do that. I want to appear quite collected. The hidden 2/3 of the iceberg. I have to tell them this because when they analyze a writer, writers do not just tell you how the fellow looks, how he dresses. The writer will also show you through dialogue, through what is called interior monologue, their thoughts, their feelings. This is what I like about literature. You can't hide from a writer. The writer is like God, he created you. So all your innermost recesses, whatever you're trying to hide, the nooks and corners, he knows. So that is what is fascinating about literature. Really fascinating. And therapeutic, it's therapy. I call it therapy. Literature is therapy. Literature is religion, and now I say literature is therapy. But I've never said that literature is money making. So the young then will say, hey, how to get money from literature? You still can do a good job, work well, get published, get fellowships. If you do a good job, people will give you fellowships, literature or otherwise.